In 2012, the relatively unknown young politician Nayib Bukele was elected as the mayor of Nuevo Cuscatlán, a modest town near San Salvador in El Salvador. Winning by only a slim margin didn't deter Bukele from addressing key issues head-on. He dedicated his efforts to tackle crime and corruption and focused on enhancing education, infrastructure, and community development. Education was a top priority for him, exemplified by the initiation of a scholarship program and a citywide campaign to promote reading. His efforts bore fruit by 2015, as Nuevo Cuscatlán reached a remarkable 100% literacy rate, becoming only the third town in the department to achieve this milestone, significantly surpassing the national average. Under Nayib Bukele's leadership as mayor, Nuevo Cuscatlán witnessed significant achievements, notably in maintaining an exceptionally low homicide rate and making considerable strides in different sectors. Remarkably, during his time in office, the town, known for its relative safety, reported just a single homicide, an impressive accomplishment in a nation troubled by gang-related violence. His administration was instrumental in establishing a round-the-clock medical clinic, a new library, and initiating a multi-million-dollar water project that ensured continuous access to potable water for the town's residents. Within a span of merely 3 years, Nuevo Cuscatlán underwent a remarkable transformation, evolving from a regular town into a model of rapid positive change. Nayib Bukele, who came from a background in consulting and political advertising, effectively used his professional skills to highlight these achievements. His commitment to improving infrastructure, education, and community development quickly established him as a politician deeply committed to public service. Nayib Bukele adopted multiple approaches to engage with the public, including posting clips of interviews and debates on YouTube. He showcased his dedication to the community by actively interacting with its members and commemorating significant achievements. Part of Bukele's efforts to create a distinct identity involved updating the city's emblem to a light blue M logo, representing the positive changes under his leadership, thereby reinforcing his reputation as a champion for the people. This transformative and brief tenure as mayor laid the foundation for his aspirations to higher political roles. Understanding the necessity for fresh leadership in a nation traditionally led by older politicians, Bukele turned his attention to the mayoral office in San Salvador, the capital. He maintained his strategy of investing in projects and infrastructure, which helped bolster his image and popularity. El Salvador, grappling with escalating homicide rates and gang violence, had its political scene long dominated by the FMLN and Arena parties. Bukele's standing within the FMLN diminished as he increasingly deviated from their policies, culminating in his expulsion from the party. Although officially attributed to supposed offensive comments, the true cause was the souring relationship between Bukele and the FMLN leadership. Nayib's break with the FMLN threw a wrench into what appeared to be a clear trajectory towards the presidency. With the door closed to joining the Arena Party and unable to gain backing from the established political parties, Bukele set his sights on forming his own political faction. However, with insufficient time before the next election, he instead aligned with a Grand Alliance for National Unity, initiating a non-traditional campaign for the presidency. Bukele's campaign strategically starkly differed from conventional methods. He took a stance against the established political system, centering his campaign on anti-corruption and a pledge for transformative change. He primarily utilized social media platforms such as Facebook and Twitter to disseminate his message. His campaign events were more akin to festive celebrations than the usual political rallies. As the election neared, poll numbers increasingly leaned in Bukele's favor. Confident in his standing, he made the bold decision to skip participating in debates, thereby distancing himself from traditional political norms. This unconventional strategy proved successful, culminating in a resounding win with 53.1% of the total votes, thereby making a second round of voting unnecessary. In June 2019, Nayib Bukele began his tenure as the President of El Salvador, initiating a period of rapid transformation. He launched the Territorial Control Plan, aiming to shift El Salvador from its status as one of the world's most perilous countries to a more secure one. This plan focused on diminishing the impact and violence of gangs. It comprised several stages. The preparation phase involved deploying police and military to high-risk communities and implementing emergency measures in prisons. The opportunity phase concentrated on community development and engaging the youth. The modernization phase was designed to better equip security forces to tackle gang activities. However, Bukele faced a hurdle in gaining legislative approval for a $109 million loan required for the modernization efforts, encountering resistance from the Legislative Assembly. In an effort to break the impasse, Bukele called an extraordinary session of the Legislative Assembly, which led to a tense standoff with the legislators. With only 20 out of 84 lawmakers present, the Assembly was unable to conduct a legal vote. The situation intensified when Bukele showed up accompanied by a substantial security force, culminating in a confrontational episode between the executive and legislative branches of the government. Central to the debate about these occurrences was their underlying intent. Was Bukele's decision to bring the army and police into the Legislative Assembly merely a symbolic gesture to underscore the urgency of passing the bill for their betterment? Or did it represent a more assertive show of strength, subtly warning the lawmakers of the military's allegiance to him, especially considering the significant $109 million funding at stake? These developments swiftly escalated into a constitutional crisis, triggering alarm on a global scale. As the situation developed, the COVID-19 pandemic hit El Salvador on March 21st. In response, Bukele declared a compulsory nationwide lockdown, stipulating that those who defy the order would be confined in designated pandemic containment centers. This measure was quickly met with legal objections. There were instances where people were apprehended before the official decree was even made public. Additionally, individuals were detained for failing to wear masks before it became a legal mandate, and some were arrested while en route to their essential jobs, as identified in the decree itself. The constitutionality of the lockdown order was dubious, and its implementation was inconsistent, leading to controversial interpretations. Within weeks, the Supreme Court invalidated the decree. The court clarified that detentions without due process were only permissible under the suspicion of a person being infected, not merely for breaching the lockdown rules. In response, Bukele challenged the Supreme Court's ruling, devising a legal sidestep. He claimed that individuals caught breaching the lockdown would be detained not for the violation itself, but under the presumption of potential infection caused by their non-compliance with the lockdown. Essentially, while the Supreme Court had made its decision, Bukele and the police effectively chose to ignore it. In the 2021 elections for El Salvador's Legislative Assembly, President Bukele's party, Nuevas Ideas, secured a sweeping victory. This triumph effectively dissolved any major resistance from opposition parties in the legislative process. Nonetheless, Bukele still faced a significant hurdle: the Supreme Court. With Nuevas Ideas holding a majority, Bukele pushed for a vote to oust the 5 Supreme Court judges who had opposed him, citing their decisions as hindrances to his pandemic response strategies. The national legislature acted on this by voting to remove these judges, paving the way for Bukele to appoint 5 new judges anticipated to support his policies. Consequently, Bukele gained influence over all 3 branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial, granting him considerable freedom to advance his political agenda. During the weekend of March 25th to 27th, 2022, El Salvador witnessed a harrowing surge in violence, with around 87 people murdered in what appeared to be random acts. The precise cause of this spike in violence remains uncertain, though it was speculated to stem from the collapse of an alleged covert agreement between the government and gangs. This supposed truce reportedly involved granting concessions to jailed gang members in return for a reduction in street violence. President Bukele, angered by the abrupt undoing of the gradual progress and early successes of his Territorial Control Plan, acted decisively in response. Bukele quickly obtained legislative approval for a 30-day state of exception. Under this, constitutional rights were suspended, allowing the police to arrest without stating reasons, and detainees were denied access to legal counsel. They could also be held for up to 15 days without appearing before a judge. This state of exception opened the door to widespread, indiscriminate detentions and was enforced immediately. In a swift response, police and military forces blanketed areas known for gang activity, detaining both confirmed gang members and those suspected of gang affiliations. In some cases, the mere presence of tattoos was deemed sufficient grounds for arrest. Reports suggested that police were given daily arrest targets, which led to a spike in dubious detentions and the incarceration of individuals who merely fit the profile of a gang member, irrespective of concrete proof. Following that fateful weekend, approximately 600 people were apprehended. A year on, with the state of exception continuously extended, the number of detained suspected gang members had escalated to nearly 70,000. This approach led to a significant segment of the adult population being imprisoned in already congested jails. Moreover, many families face challenges in locating and identifying their detained relatives within the overwhelmed legal system. In response to the situation, a new prison named the Terrorism Confinement Center was rapidly built and opened in early 2023. President Bukele showcased this facility to the public through carefully scripted and produced video tours. Designed to house around 40,000 inmates, this prison became the largest in the world. Bukele highlighted his involvement in the project and the government's increased ability to supervise the incarcerated individuals. Notably, these actions led to a marked decrease in homicides. In March 2022, the country's daily homicide rate averaged at 4.8, slightly above the annual average of 3.1. Yet, in April, the first full month after the crackdown on gangs, the rate plummeted to 1.3 homicides per day, and in May, it dropped even further to an average of 0.5 per day. From April 2022 onwards, no month has recorded a daily average homicide rate of more than 1. Although there were doubts about the exact accuracy of the figures, the general reality was undeniable. El Salvador had become much safer than it had been for years. For the first time in the memory of many inhabitants, the streets were walkable and life could be led without the omnipresent shadow of fear. This emergence of safety and freedom marked a transformative and pivotal change, fostering optimism for a more hopeful future. In spite of reservations regarding the balance of power and the judicial system, President Bukele enjoyed an exceptionally high approval rating, with about 90% of Salvadorans in favor of his methods. His popularity ranked him among the most well-regarded presidents on a global scale. On the international stage, Nayib Bukele's reputation contrasts significantly with his domestic image. He has been criticized by various international bodies, including the United Nations, Human Rights Watch, and the U.S. State Department, and numerous global media outlets. These organizations and observers have voiced concerns over what they see as a democratic regression in El Salvador. Notably, the country is just 9 months away from its next presidential election, and Bukele has declared his intention to run for re-election. Yet his candidacy faces a potential legal hurdle. The country's constitution, in Article 152, stipulates that anyone who has served as president for more than 6 consecutive months or in the 6 months preceding the start of the presidential term is ineligible to run for the presidency. This clause has traditionally been interpreted as a bar against successive presidential terms. However, in 2021, the Supreme Court, reconstituted under Bukele's administration, altered this interpretation, thereby paving the way for consecutive presidential terms. The contrast between how Salvadorans view their situation and the perception of the international community could be perceived as patronizing. This viewpoint suggests that more developed countries believe they understand the situation better, implying that Salvadorans are incapable of making informed decisions themselves. This kind of paternalistic attitude has been the feature of El Salvador's relationship with the United States, which has a history of involvement in Salvadoran political affairs. Part of the international apprehension might originate from this historical context. Alternatively, the global concern could also arise from a more detached analytical standpoint. Those who have not experienced the decades of violence and unrest in El Salvador might adopt a more logical approach when evaluating the trade-offs made to tackle the issue of gang violence. The core of international concerns regarding Bukele isn't solely about whether he's a benevolent dictator, but rather the inherent risks of a system that consolidates excessive power in one person. Democratic systems with their checks and balances might operate slowly, but they are structured to thoroughly scrutinize decisions, often sacrificing immediate results for sustained stability. Conversely, El Salvador appears to be opting for immediate benefits at the expense of long-term stability. This raises a critical question. Are these immediate gains worth the potential long-term costs, especially when tackling the country's most urgent problems, or could this approach be a grave error? The decision ultimately rests with the Salvadoran people. They have the sovereign right to choose their nation's direction without external meddling, even if it means choosing a leader whom some might regard as a threat to democracy.